Hello. In today's video, I will explain to you how we can configure a port on a switch as a routed port and how to configure it with an IP address. I hope my videos are helpful for those who are seeking to be certified for the Cisco exams. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel and share it on your Facebook page and give me the thumb up. And please, let me know if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions. I will gladly answer you back. On my Facebook page, I created a group where I posted all of my labs there. The name of the group, CCNA Free Practice Labs Walkthrough. You need to install Packet Tracer. I posted a video to show you step-by-step how to download and install Packet Tracer either in English or Arabic. See my video channel or my group on Facebook and please follow through. On the description of this video, you will find two files, one for the Packet Tracer source files and the documents to walk you through the lab step by step until you finally will be able to verify the configurations you did during this lab. Now, a routed port on a layer 3 switch is commonly used for connecting between distribution and core layer switches or between a layer 3 switch and a router. This port does not get VLAN or trunking commands assigned to it, and instead the port is programmed with an IP address. And we have a question here to say, can layer 3 switch route between VLANs? VLANs divide broadcast domains in a LAN environment. Whenever hosts in one VLAN need to communicate with hosts in another VLAN, the traffic must be routed between them. This is known as inter-VLAN routing. On Catalyst switches, it's accomplished by the creation of layer 3 interfaces, the switch virtual interfaces, SVIs. Now, what is the difference between SVI and routed port? There are two types of layer 3 ports that can be configured on a switch depending on what you need to do. An SVI is for inter-VLAN communication on a switch without the need for a router. And a routed port functions entirely at layer 3, no layer 2 services. The routed port, it will be reconfigured on the physical interface. The command, the no switch port command, puts the interface in layer 3 mode known as routed port and makes it operate more like a router interface rather than a switch port. The IP address command assigns an IP address and network mask to the interface. It's supported only on switches running the IP-based or IP services image. The switch port mode access always forces that port to be an access port with no VLAN tagging allowed except VLAN. DTP is not used and a trunk will never be formed. It will also use DTP to negotiate a neighboring interface that is set dynamic desirable or dynamic auto into a trunk. Now, what is Cisco SVI? A switched virtual interface is routed interface in iOS representing the IP addressing space for particular VLAN connected to this interface. There is no physical interface for the VLAN, and the SVI provides the layer 3 processing for packets from all switch ports associated with the VLAN. What is the default SVI on a Cisco switch? A default SVI is created on the layer 3 switches for VLAN 1. VLAN 1 is our default native VLAN, which is meant for remote management of switches. This implies that an IP address can be assigned to this interface for the purpose of management. In today's lab, I'm going to show you routed ports on multi-layer switches. Here we have in this topology diagram, switch 1, switch 2, router 1, and the internet. All what I did so far is that I configured the host names on the network devices here and the interface connected to switch 2 from the router is enabled. Nothing more is configured yet. Now I will run this command on switch 1, enable show CDP neighbor. As you can see here, it's showing us the device ID, which is connected as a neighbor to switch 1 is switch 2, and is connected via this interface of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1. I'll do the same on switch 2, enable show CDP neighbors. Here showing us that it is connected to switch 1 on this port of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1, and it's connected to the other neighbor, router 1, on this interface here. Now, I'll go back to switch 1 and run this command, show the interface of gig 1/0/1 switch port, and let's study this table here. This is the command I put here on the switch. The name of the port is gig 1/0/1, and showing us that this port is configured as a switch port, and the administrative mode is dynamic auto. Operational mode, as you can see here, is static access, and here the access mode for VLAN, which is by default, as you can see here, is VLAN 1. I will just minimize this a little bit, and I will run this command to see if we have any port on this switch is configured as a trunk, and the command goes like this: show interface, or any interface which is configured as a trunk. We type it show interface trunk and then hit enter. It's not showing us any results, which means that we did not have any port on this switch configured as a trunk. And the same, I'll run it on switch 2, show any interface is configured as a trunk, show interface trunk, and then hit enter. And it is the same results as we had with the switch 1. Now I'll go back to switch 1 and I'll run this command, show VLAN brief. We want to see a brief about the VLANs configured on this switch. As you can see here, all the ports on this switch are configured to the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1. Notice here this interface of gig 1/0/1 on switch 1 is still within VLAN, the default VLAN 1, and they are configured as switch ports. I'll do the same on switch 2, show VLAN brief. As you can see here, the same results. All the ports on the switch belongs to the native VLAN, which is VLAN 1. Now I will configure SVI on both the switches. I'll minimize this a little bit here. Go back to switch 1, minimize this again so we can see the topology. Now, as you can see here, for switch 1, we have VLAN 1 with this IP address. As you can see here, the command simply goes like this: configure terminal. We want to configure the VLAN 1 with the IP address, as you can see here on the topology of 172.16.1.1, and this is with a /24 subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and I will enable it or activate it with the no shut command and then hit enter. I'll do the same on switch 2. Switch 2, we have for VLAN 1 the SVI, this IP address here, and this is what I'm going to be configuring. Configure terminal, the interface of VLAN 1, and this is with the IP address of 172.16.1.2 with /24 subnet mask, and I will enable this with the no shut command. Now the interfaces on both switches, on this interface on switch 1 and this interface on switch 2 are layer 2 interfaces in regard to OSI model and are enabled as switch ports interfaces. Now I will run this command on both switch 1 and switch 2. From here, I will type this command, show spanning a tree. here, this command on switch 1 showing us that the interface of gig 1/0/1 here, this is the root port and it's in the forwarding state. It's showing us here. I will run this command on switch 2, and from here, show spanning tree. Look here, we have both ports here on this side connected to switch 1 on gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1. It is designated port and it is on forwarding state. And the other port connected to router 1 on this port, and it is designated port and it's in a forwarding state. Now, here is how we can configure the switch port interface into a routing port. It's when you choose a specific port on the layer 3 switch to make it run as a routed port. I'll go back to switch 1, and from here we want the port of configure terminal here. We want the port of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1. This port connected to switch 2, we want this to be configured as a routed port. Simply type this command, no switch port, and then hit enter. As you can see, the port went down and then up. Click enter again. Now, as I said, this port is a routed port, and we can configure it with an IP address, just like you configure a port on a router. So we're still on the configuration of this port of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1, and now I will give it this IP address, as you can see here in the topology diagram, of 10.1.1.1 with a /24 subnet mask, and it took it. Now I will enable it. Sure, it is enabled, but with an shut command. Now here I was able to configure the port with an IP address because it's a routed port. And how we know that's a routed port? Because we give it the command to say no switch port, which is a routed port now. This is specific port on this switch. Now if I run this command here on switch 1, show spanning tree, before we were able to see that when we run this command here, that this port, we run this command, show spanning tree, showed us this port of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1 as the root port, and it was in a forwarding state. But then we configured the port with an IP address, or as a routed port with a no switch port command, and gave it an IP address. And when we run the command show spanning tree, it's showing no spanning tree instance exists. I will try to configure this port here on switch 2 with an IP address to see if it's gonna allow us. Configure terminal, the interface of gig 1/0/1, enter. Now IP address, and as you can see, it is unrecognized command because this port is still acting as a switch port. Now on switch 2, I will exit from here and show spanning tree. Sorry about that. It's still showing us here on switch 2 that the port connected to the router is still designated port and forwarding state, and the port connecting to switch 1 is the same designated port and still in forwarding state. Now you can configure an IP address directly on a routed port, as I illustrated earlier, and you cannot do it on a switch port. Now, if we configure the interface here, this interface on switch 2 as a routed port, it will allow us to configure an IP address on it. Now, configure terminal. We want this interface of gig 1/0/1. Simply type no switch port, and I will be able to give it an IP address of 10.1.1.2/24 subnet mask and activate it with a no shut command. I will exit from here. Now show spanning tree. Here is showing us just the port connected to the router as a designated port and in forwarding state, but this port here of gig 101/0/1 here connected to switch 1 when we configured it as a routed port is not showing in this table after we run this command show spanning tree. But before it was showing us here as you can see here as a designated port, but we configured it as a routed port with a no switch port command and then configured an IP address. And then when I ran the command to show us the spanning tree on this switch, and it's telling us that this port showing us just a port connected to router 1. Now, I'll say it again. We notice here in this table that the port here is not listed, the one connected to switch 1, because it's a routed port. We can see the port connected to router 1, and it is a designated port. Now I should be able to ping switch 2 from, so I'll go to switch 1, type the command ping 10.1.1.2, and it should be successful, and I'll run it again. Now on switch 2, here I will run this command show IP interface brief. Here it's gonna show us that the interface, I'll smile a little bit, this interface here of gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1 with this IP address, and showing us that we have SVI layer 3 is configured on the switch for VLAN 1 on this switch. And I'll say it again that this showing us that the interface of here is not listed in the table and it has been configured as a routed interface, but here we can see the port which is connected to router 1 is listed and belongs to the default VLAN 1, and it is a switch port. Now I will configure the interface here on switch 2 connected to or facing router 1 as a routed port, and configure it with an IP address of 10.2.2.1 with a subnet mask of 24. So now I'll minimize this a little bit here. Now from the global configuration, the interface of gig 1/0/2, the port connected to router 1, and I will run this command, no switch port, and hit enter. Now I'll be able to give it an IP address of 10.2.2.1/24 subnet mask, and I will enable the port with the no shut command. Now I'll exit from here and run this command show spanning tree and hit enter. Before it was showing us, before we configured this port here connected to router 1 as a routed port, it showed us this port was listed, let me go up a little bit here, as a designated port and was in forwarding state. But now when I ran it, after I configured this port as a routed port, it's telling us no spanning tree instance exists. Now I will configure this interface here on router 1, the port facing router switch 2 with the IP address of 10.2.2.2/24 subnet mask. So on router 1, enable, configure terminal, the interface of gig 0/0. This is with the IP address, as you can see here, of 10.2.2.2/24 subnet mask. And it is enabled already, as I said at the beginning of this video, but I'll run or enable it with the no shut command. Now I will run this command here on this router, show IP interface brief. As you can see here, this interface of Gigabit Ethernet 00 is configured with this IP address, and the status is up and up. Now I will try to ping a switch to the interface facing router 1. So from router 1, I'll try to ping 10.2.2.1. This should be successful. I'll run it again. Now I will try to ping the interface facing a switch 1. From here, try to run this command, ping 10.1.1.2 from router 1 and hit enter, and this should fail. Now on switch 1, I will run this command, show IP route. On switch 1, show IP route, and showing us nothing on the routing table. The show IP route command is used to show the router's routing table. This is the list of all networks that the router can reach, their metric, the router's preference for them, and how to get there. We configure the port as a routed port here. IP route command is used to configure the static route. Static routes are the most secure way of routing. Data is routed from its source to its destination through a series of routers and across multiple networks. The IP routing protocols enable routers to build up a forwarding table that correlates final destination with the next hop address. Now, we're still on switch 1. I will enable IP routing on the global configuration mode. IP, simply just type IP routing and then hit enter. I will end from here and then type the command show IP route. And as you can see here, it's showing us this network of 10.1.1.0 is directly connected, the network between switch 1 and switch 2. And also for the SVI or the VLAN 1 on the switch. Now from switch 1, I will run this command, try to ping router 1 interface facing switch 2, ping 10.2.2.2, and then hit enter, and this should fail. Why? Because I still need to enable IP routing on switch 2 in order for the packets to move between networks. So I will go to switch 2 here and run the same command from the global configuration mode. Or before that, I will run this command, show IP route, nothing here, configure terminal, IP routing, and in, and then show IP route. As you can see, the networks of 10.1.1.0 is directly connected, and the other, the SVI, which we configured for VLAN 1 on switch 2. Now back to switch 1, I will ping, run the same ping 10.2.2, and then hit enter. This once again should fail. Why? Because I need to configure a static route on switch 1. I configure a static route from switch 1 to the network of the router between router 1 and router 2. So I'm still on switch 1 in the global configuration mode, IP route to the network of 10.2.2.0, and this network with the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and our next hop to reach this network should be on this interface of 10.1.1.2, and then hit enter. And I will do the same. I configure a static route from switch 1. I'll do the same on router 1 here on the global configuration mode, IP route to this network of 10.1.1.0 with /24 subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and our next hop or gateway to reach this network here between switch 1 and switch 2 is this interface of 10.2.2.1, and then hit enter. I'll end from here and now show IP route on the router, and it's showing us this static route to reach this network via this interface as you can see here. And on switch 1, I'll do the same, run this command show IP route, and showing us that we can reach this network between router 1 and switch 2 via this interface, or our next hop will be on this interface on switch 2. Now, if I run the command to ping this interface on the router, ping 10.2.2.2, and this should be successful. Hit enter. As you can see, we were able to. And I'll do the same, run the ping switch 1 interface of 10.1.1.1, and then hit enter, and it was successful. Now, I configured the static routes here on this topology, and when you reach this point, you try to configure a dynamic route, just like EIGRP, and then run the ping commands. And if you have any difficulties, please reach me and I'll show you how to do it, how to configure it on the interfaces, and we'll be able to ping from router 1 and switch 1. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something from this video. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach me either on Facebook or write me a comment. I'll see you soon in my next video. Wishing you a nice day. Thank you so much.